Back, Casey Campbell with Great Lakes Post with you, of course, and we are pleased to be joined by Nathan Byrd of the USAC Silver Crown Series. And yes, he is part of that famous family that's ran in the Indy 500 a couple times as well. How's it going, man?
Going pretty good. Good day so far. Good race on Sunday, and just been did a little bit of traveling yesterday, and now we are here in Indiana, gearing up for the weekend here, running at IMS on the road course with the Skip Barber F4 series. So excited for that, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, so for people that don't know you, kind of tell a little bit about yourself.
So, man, I mean, growing up, never really had much of an interest in motorsports. I was sort of an athlete, always like I did soccer growing up and off and on. And eventually in high school, I did football, soccer, and track all in the same year. And then the next year I did soccer. And then the year after that, I actually switched to cheer, competitive cheer. And I did that for 2 years, my junior and senior year, and went to state and nationals. And that was a lot of fun. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to do multiple sports during that time period of cheer, but that was okay. I was able to do soccer my junior year and be the co-captain of the team. But yeah, growing up, just a straight A student, pretty straight edge, nothing too crazy. And yeah, then my dad proposed the idea of racing to me after I graduated 2018. During that summer, he proposed the idea, and yeah, it's been uphill ever since in terms of racing. I mean, now I get to realize the dream I never realized I even had in the first place. So yeah, I've been 3 years since then, and a little over a year and a half of racing cars. So yeah, and here I am racing 15 different series and 80 race and an 80 race schedule. Probably going to be very similar next year as well, and just trying to get better and better.
Yeah, man. So of course you were running in I'm not on to list all the series you run in because it's a lot. But Sunday you were at the USAC Silver Crown race up in Toledo.
hmm
How do you think you did with all that, and how do you think you've been doing with all this with this USAC stuff that you've been in the last few years?
So a lot of the USAC, I mean, the USAC stuff really only started the very end of last year when I had my first midget race, and that was at Lucas Oil Raceway. 2020, where I started my car career, February 2020, I just started in the Lucas Oil School of Racing, that series, just running formula cars and just trying to get the fundamentals, the basics after doing only like a year and a half of go-karting. And with mild success in that arena. And then I switched to the Lucas Oil series, and then near the very end of that year, did a couple of focus midget races just to get my toes wet in the short track scene, the short track pavement scene. And then a couple races in with the focus midget, then I'm already hopping into a full size champion midget at Lucas Oil Raceway and with Davey Ray. And I felt like I did pretty good for that first one. I got about halfway through the race and I spun, hit the wall, tapped the wall with my rear end, and then the guys thought like I had some massive issue. I like, hey, can I keep on going? They said, no, you got to get out. You have too much damage. They ended up taking the crane, taking it back to the pits, and they set it down. And David Ray's like, there's no damage here. Why do they why didn't let you keep on racing? And yeah, so that ended my my debut in terms of the full size midgets and like sort of the USAC scene. But yeah, and then now it's just this year I've been running the midget at Lucas Oil Raceway, and Silver Crown that was my fourth race at Toledo Speedway, and I think I did fairly well. I was the first one we were actually able to finish because the first three I got taken out early, 5 laps into my first Silver Crown race, my debut race, technically by Eric Gordon, unfortunately, 5 laps in, and that ended the race. I ended up flipping. If anyone saw that clip on Flow Racing, but and then Davey Hamilton and crew got the car back in working order, and going into Winchester Speedway, the next one, I got halfway through the race after not having been able to practice because of a fuel line issue, and we ended up going about halfway through the race before we had worn a hole in the bottom of the fuel tank and the fuel bladder, and we ended up dropping fuel, and I had to come into the pits, and that was the end of that race because just a mechanical issue that we couldn't figure out because we didn't have practice. And then my third race, Lucas Oil Raceway, didn't quite get through that one all the way either because I was actually running really, really well. In all these races, I had pace for like top 10, top 7, and I knew that. I knew I had that in me, and I knew that we had that in the car. And according to my pace and my qualifying position in all those previous races, I was on track for a top 10 finish easy. And just according to the people I qualified with and how the race ended up shaking out. And we were able to get it done this time around at Toledo Speedway with the top 6 finish, almost a top 5. I actually did pass Logan Seavey for, I think it was 8th place at the time, when me and DJ Davey Hamilton Jr. split Logan Seavey down the front straight, and then DJ got into I forget who he was, but he was running in 7th,
Yeah.
and I actually passed Logan Seavey, crossed the finish line, and then the caution came out, and they still gave Logan Seavey back the position. I was like, okay, just gotta work a little bit harder to pass him again. That didn't necessarily set me up well in terms of tire preservation, because I was having to pass him. It took about 10 laps to pass him again, and after that, I was working on Brian Tyler and Kyle O'Gara, and he wasn't easy to pass either. So it took me a lot of laps to get through the traffic, and eventually I was up in 5th place. By that point, I maybe could have even been up to 4th if I didn't have to repass Logan. But no, it was really good. And eventually, me trying to pass Brian and the scuffle that happened there, DJ was able to get a inside nose on me and be able to pass me for 5th, and I ended up finishing 6th. But we got the finish that we definitely deserved, and me and DJ running identical lap times. Our fastest lap times were literally identical, 15.850 back-to-back laps. Mine was on lap 47, his one was on lap 48. So we're running right with each other, and it was a really great battle, trying to keep him behind me the whole race while trying to pass and move forward throughout the race, and with Kyle and Logan. So I felt like I did really well. The car was awesome, and Davey Hamilton and Matt, they did a really good job in getting prepped. So I was pretty happy about my performance overall.
Yeah,
gotta say.
So I asked you this at Toledo, but what's like next for you the rest of the year?
Okay. Well, I was just asking my dad, like, what's the rundown for the rest of the year? And I think I have it memorized. So this weekend, we're going to be racing Skip Barber F4 at Indy on the road course. And then next weekend, we're going to be running at Mid-Ohio in the endurance round in the AAR, American Endurance Racing. And the weekend after that, we're going to be racing the 24-hour race at Sebring with the World Racing League. And weekend after that, it's going to be modified at Las Vegas Speedway. I think there's a short track there, the one, not the big track, but
Bullring. Yep.
Yeah, the Bullring. I'm going to be racing the modified there in the Spears Series with our RC Racing.
Nice.
And weekend after that, I'm going to be running with Mike Creven in the Focus Midget at Lake Havasu 95 Speedway in my home state. See what we can do there. And then after that, we're going to be going to I think I have an off weekend finally, and then we're back to AER running at COTA. I'm pretty sure that's the final race of my year is going to be COTA. So yeah, keeping busy.
Jam-packed schedule for you as always, Nathan. So I know you haven't been racing for a while, but how have you enjoyed it so far?
So it's like, as I said earlier, it was the dream I never really realized I had. I mean, just the racing itself obviously is fun. It's competitive. It's a competitive setting, which I always enjoyed growing up with my high school sports. And just it's always really, really fun developing a skill set that you never had before and getting better and better and seeing results that show they're getting better and better just in anything in life when you build that skill set. And you go from beginner to intermediate to advanced to expert eventually. It's a really satisfying process just in itself. And getting to meet all these awesome folks that all 15 different racing teams I'm working with, and meeting all those guys and getting to make all these new relationships and connections is something I never really thought I could have done. And overall, I mean, and just traveling everywhere. Granted, I don't really get to see either outside of my hotel, rental car, airplane, or the racetrack I'm racing at in terms of getting the sightseeing stuff that's not really happening, or the inside of a fast food drive through or a restaurant really is all I get to do. But can't really complain when I'm the guy driving at 130 miles per hour around Lucas Oil Raceway in a midget. So there's definitely pros and cons, but I think the pros far outweigh the cons, and just trying to finish up school, get that done and over with. Because at this point, my eyes are set on full-time professional racing. It's pretty much what I'm already doing. It's just school on the side almost. But yeah, really, I at this point, I could probably say with certainty that I do love racing and I love competing, and can't really complain with where I'm at in terms of the long-term goals that I have. I feel like I'm on path.
So what do you want to do? Where do you want to end up? Do you just want to continue the schedule you're doing now, or is there like a set goal for you?
So right now, I mean, I do sort of, I mean, the sort of premise that we're doing right now, I mean, running in 15 different series in 80 different races across a single year. I don't think that's ever been done before by anyone.
I don't even know.
And
I don't even know if that's even possible.
I mean, we're proving it as we speak, but I think
can see that.
yeah, but in terms of that whole point, reason why we're doing that, first of all, we're trying to build my skill of adaptability, getting in any car, I like being able to jump into any car and immediately taking it to the limit, being highly competitive, being one of the top 5, top 10 guys, depending on the competitiveness of the series, and just being a really compelling race car driver in that sense. I mean, the whole scheme of Byrd Racing, the mantra is be interesting, do interesting. And we're trying to be interesting and do interesting, and trying to make compelling narratives and storylines that the fans can enjoy, that they can be entertained by. And that's really, ultimately, that's the goal, is to be interesting, do interesting. And whether that means, obviously, I'm not going to be sticking around in the Skip Barber F4 series for my entire professional racing career, because that's just a developmental stepping stone. But a lot of the short track racing that I'm doing, midget, sprint car, hopefully next year we can add as well with the Little 500 and Silver Crown and Wing Midget and the NEMA Midget series and Super Modified eventually, and the Modified, like all these things. It's guys work their entire racing careers to get to those top levels of those particular disciplines. So in terms of that, I mean, we're already there. But in terms of formula car racing, that's sort of the end goal. The primary goal is being able to make it to the Indy 500, and because that's our obviously family legacy. That's sort of our bread and butter, if you speak, as well as short track racing, which we did with Rich Vogler back in the 80s and I think the early 90s. But I mean, the primary goal right now is getting me to a point where I can take on the challenge that is the Indy 500, and being proficient in an Indy car, in the formula car style setting like that, at that highest level of American racing. That's the primary goal. And then after that, if we can be interesting, do interesting while achieving our primary goal, with, like, say next year running either the entire F3 series or the entire FRP, like weekends and rounds, and getting a lot of seat time that way in the formula car side of things, trying to develop in that end, as well as doing all the short track stuff that we already are doing on the top level. That's sort of the goal in terms of moving forward, staying interesting, but also working our way towards the goal of the Indy 500. And then after that, it's sort of the sky's the limit after that, where we can make some of the most incredible schedules that anyone's ever seen, like running Indy 500, doing the Indy Charlotte double, Daytona 500, 24-hour Le Mans, 24 hours of or 12 hours of Sebring, like all those biggest races, Knoxville Nationals, Chili Bowl, the biggest Silver Crown races, doing all that in a single year. That's sort of the most compelling storyline that could ever really exist. And running the Australian S5000 series and Super Formula in Japan, and I mean, we'd be just shy of racing F1 basically, as like how much we're trying to capture. And if we, like, that's sort of like the ultimate goal. If I can get to a point where I'm highly competitive and highly proficient in all those disciplines, and across just being that diverse of a race car driver and that compelling, that's sort of the ultimate goal. But we got to make the Indy 500 first.
Okay. Hold up. Because you just said a bunch of things, and listed off basically every single iconic race. You didn't mention the 24 Hours Daytona. You didn't mention the U.S. Nationals for NHRA, so you're probably going to do that too.
Probably. I mean, why
How
not? Why
do
not?
you
Why
do
not?
all these? Let me ask you this: how are you going to do all these things, though?
So
Because these
I
are
mean,
disciplined types of cars. Like, getting in an Indy car is something else. Getting in a 5,000 ton stock car is a completely whole different challenge. I know people
yeah,
have done it. I know that a lot of NASCAR, because I'm in the NASCAR world. I mean, I'm in the IndyCar world as well. And really basically in all forms of racing, but mostly in the stock car world.
yeah,
Those cars are tough to drive, man.
yeah. They're no joke. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you can see how some of these guys that go from IndyCar to NASCAR, like Juan Pablo Montoya, obviously F1, IndyCar, proficient in the Indy 500, and he goes to NASCAR and he sort of struggles. He's not doing as well as people might expect him to, and that's sort of a barrier or a hurdle I'd like to jump as early as possible. I mean, I'm not going to spend however many years he spent just driving formula cars, basically, is really all he did,
Right.
like for the majority of his career. And he tries to switch to a completely different discipline that is short track racing, sort of the NASCAR, closed fenders, no exposed wheels, sort of really heavy cars, a lot of horsepower, but it's really heavy, so it's harder to control, and all those factors. I'm trying to sort of like keep myself in an environment like running prolates with Rick Ware Racing this year as the 2021 development driver. I think is a good stepping stone in terms of me knowing how that sort of racing goes in terms of Rubbing's racing, and in the open wheel world, Rubbing is crashing and potentially dying. So you don't want to do that. And I'm sort of trying to tackle all the disciplines at once. We're probably going to, for now, stay away from the closed fender side of things while we're trying to focus on my formula car development, because the Indy 500 is the primary goal. Hopefully 2024 at the earliest, if we can make it, if I'm proficient and capable. But that is really the goal, is being able to do everything, being as diverse as possible, building, as I said, the skill of adaptability that a lot of guys that are only going through the road to Indy, and a lot of guys that are only going from legends to prolates to truck Xfinity Cup, like there's those diverging paths, and my goal is to do both of those paths at the same time and not limit myself to one particular discipline. And I think when I build that skill set of adaptability, I'm able to, I mean, even with running this coming year with Carb Night, I'm planning on racing Little 500, midget, like Little 500 Anderson Speedway, midget, Silver Crown, and potentially USF 2000 and IP 2000 all in the same night or the same weekend, depending on how the schedule goes. And I don't know if sprint cars in there, but if it's actually no sprint cars at Little 500, but I mean, yeah, that's pretty much like, that's the goal this coming year, is just if I can get into each of those cars and take it to the limit, that's sort of the ultimate goal as in terms of what we're trying to achieve and being as adaptable and diverse as possible.
I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, you just listed off a bunch of stuff, and I know you got a lot of goals, and I know you have set goals, and that's great. And I know you want to do a lot. And actually, we're kind of starting to see that now with a lot of drivers racing other different types of series. Let's just look at Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
Doing what he did. But do you feel like you need some time in these cars before you go out and accomplish that? Because you got a lot of things you want to do, but then again, no one's doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is nobody's really, I mean, other than back in the day when Mario and Tony Stewart,
like when everybody raced everything.
Yeah, when everyone raced everything. I mean, granted, there wasn't, like, people were able to do that, but also the cars weren't as specialized in their platforms and the way you have to drive them in order to maximize them, the skill set and the techniques they have to develop over years of staying in that one particular discipline. at least that's the theory that we've heard. That's the narrative that we've been essentially been establishing over the course of the last, whatever, 10 to 20 years, 30 years maybe. And the theory is you're going to become a better race car driver if you race more. You're going to become a better racer the more you race. Whether, I mean, my dad's of the opinion, his axiomatic truth is if you can drive a midget at Lucas Oil Raceway and be a contender, be one of the top guys, be able to win the race, then you can drive anything and you can take anything to the limit. So that's sort of the theory that we're operating under, which is if you can be that guy who can race in all those different things, yeah, it does take a couple of years to get better and improve and go up the ladder. That's what we're doing on the Formula Car side of things, starting in the Lucas Oil Series where it's low horsepower, no downforce, no wings anywhere. And then now this year we're doing F1000, F4, F2000, USF 2000, doing, we almost did an F3 test, but that didn't go through. But doing all these different disciplines is just the next step up. And the next year, F3, the next year, potentially Indy Lights, and then eventually IndyCar, Indy 500. So we are putting in our hours, so to speak, but we're also putting in the hours across a wide variety of cars. So, I mean, I'm sort of a baby in the racing world. Kyle Kirkwood has been racing since he's like 5 years old. That's most guys in the road to Indy nowadays. And the fact of the situation is I'm trying to make up for lost time. And with the sort of diverse and accelerated schedule that I'm on, I think it is possible, and I am showing, and I am seeing results in terms of my development, especially in the last 10 weeks, in terms of just being able to feel the car and understand everything that's going on. And every single crew chief that I go back to, once I leave them from a modified race and I go back to them 4 weeks later after having done 3 weekends of other cars, that I go back into their car and I do even better. And every single time I get back into the same car, I improve. And they're seeing that, and they're sort of giving me that sort of feedback, my dad, that sort of feedback. So as of right now, the theory seems to be holding up, but it's really the true test is going to be, can I get to the Xfinity series and run it at the top level at the same time as I'm running Indy Lights at the top level, if that's the sort of thing that we're trying to do. And that's the question. And that's,
I don't think that's even possible.
And that's sort of the what we're trying to see if that is possible. That's sort of the narrative we're trying to establish.
I mean, the Xfinity series runs 33 times a year. And yes, the Indy Lights series doesn't run as much as the Xfinity series does, but
yeah,
there's races on Friday, Saturday, but practice and qualify Friday, race on Saturday, race on Sunday for some of the most IndyCar weekends. For the Xfinity series, most of those races are usually ran on Saturday, some on Friday nights. Just depends on what the schedule is.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of doing it on the same weekend, we wouldn't try and do that, but we would try to do, say, if there's 10 Indy Lights weekends in a year, we're going to try to do, and if there's any conflict between, say, Xfinity and Indy Lights, we're going to see what the conflicts are, try to do what Xfinity, I mean, it's all about also the value of the seat time. I mean, running in the FRP series, trying to do 3 different cars, F1000, Formula Atlantic, and F2000 on each FRP weekend, that's about 9 hours of seat time total across those 3 different cars, and like something like 9 races or 8, or like more like maybe 8 races, 6 to 8 races every single weekend of the FRP rounds. So, and that's really good value for what we're trying to get in terms of seat time. I mean, seat time. And if I could keep on taking these cars to the limit, and I go back to the pro late and say I do even better than I did before, then that's sort of showing, even though I wasn't in the pro late, racing only the pro late, I actually improved from all the other racing that I was doing. And I was just able to apply the principles, and I was able to apply my discipline, my braking control, my throttle control, my sensitivity of the car, and what I'm feeling in terms of the balance and all those different things. It's different, and when you go to another discipline, but it's also kind of the same when you're able to translate it back and forth. So that is what we're trying to see is, can we do less races in the individual competitions than, say, a typical USF 2000 full season racer, if I can do 3 of the weekends instead of 6 of the weekends and do all this other racing on the side that's potentially less expensive. And then I get back into that car and I do even better still, then that's sort of what we're trying to see. Can we make our seat time more valuable and make it more efficient, essentially? So that's what we're trying to see. And I think we're proving it as of so far. But the higher you get up in the ladders, the more competitive everything gets, and the more disciplined and specialized you sort of have to be in those particular disciplines to really excel. And I mean, we're sort of seeing it. I'm racing at the top level of midget, Silver Crown, and sprint cars and wing midgets and all those. I mean, those guys work their entire lives, and those are sort of the end goals, modifieds too. And I'm racing in the top 5, top 7 in all of those disciplines, even though I'm not. I mean, I was pressuring Brian Tyler in the Silver Crown race, who had his 201st Silver Crown start, and that was my 4th. So I think we're seeing something of a. I'm sort of wanting to see if I can shift the narrative from you only have to do one thing in order to be good, in order to become a good race car driver. And in the process, you can race more. So ultimately, it's a win-win if that ends up being something we can do.
Yeah. Do you get all that? That's a lot to take in, bud. So yeah, it's good stuff there. And because you're doing some great stuff, man. But Nathan Byrd, thank you so much for coming on. We'll definitely continue conversation earlier. We'll maybe get to know you maybe in a few weeks too, because there's a lot I wanted to get to you, but obviously it's we'll let you get back and we'll talk about some of the races that you've done. This is you're kind of interesting. So we'll follow you throughout your racing career and see where it takes you.
I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on. It was really awesome. And yeah, I just gave you guys a quick debrief and rundown of Byrd racing, who's Birdman, what's he trying to do. And hopefully you guys stay tuned in my future endeavors. We'll see where things go. You can check up on me and see if I've improved from the last point where we left off. So I'm excited to see as well.